Brielle Montgomery, 34, never expected to discover that blood truly wasn't thicker than water in the most devastating way possible. When her 7-year-old son needed an $85,000 surgery to survive, she turned to her wealthy parents, who had just spent $230,000 on her sister's dream wedding. Their cold refusal shattered her world and set in motion a chain of events that would forever change her family's legacy. Before we dive into my shocking family story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want more family revenge drama just like this one. Trust me, you'll want to see how karma finally caught up with my parents in the most unexpected way. For as long as I could remember, the Montgomery family had been the envy of our upscale Connecticut neighborhood. My father, Richard Montgomery, had built a successful investment firm from the ground up, while my mother, Eleanor, maintained our pristine public image through charity galas and country club memberships. Our Tudor-style mansion with its manicured gardens and heated indoor pool was the backdrop for countless society events. From the outside, we were the perfect American family, wealthy, accomplished, and seemingly loving. Growing up as the eldest daughter, I was expected to uphold our family's reputation. I excelled academically, graduating from Princeton with honors in business administration, just as my father had always planned. My younger sister Vanessa, 3 years my junior, took a different path. While I was studious and reserved, Vanessa was outgoing and charismatic. She dropped out of college to pursue modeling, which initially disappointed our parents but eventually became acceptable when she started appearing in national campaigns. Despite our differences, I believed Vanessa and I shared a genuine bond. We confided in each other about our strict upbringing and the pressure to maintain the Montgomery image. When I met David, a dedicated pediatric nurse with a heart of gold but a modest income, Vanessa was the first person I told about my feelings for him. "Follow your heart, Bree," she had said, using my nickname that only family knew. "You deserve happiness." My parents, however, were less enthusiastic. They had envisioned me marrying within our social circle, preferably the son of one of my father's business associates. When I announced my engagement to David, my mother's pearl necklace nearly snapped from how hard she clutched it. "A nurse, Brielle, really? What about Jonathan Whitfield? His father's hedge fund is merging with Wells Fargo next month," my mother had said during an uncomfortable family dinner. "I love David, mother. He's kind, intelligent, and makes me happy," I replied firmly. My father barely looked up from his prime rib. "Well, don't expect us to fund an extravagant wedding for this choice." Despite their disapproval, David and I married in a small ceremony at a local botanical garden, paying for everything ourselves. Vanessa stood beside me as my maid of honor, whispering encouragement throughout the day. My parents attended, but remained cold and distant, leaving immediately after the ceremony, without attending the reception. David and I settled into a comfortable life in a modest suburban home about 30 minutes from my parents' estate. I started my own financial consulting firm for small businesses, while David continued his work at the Children's Hospital. When I became pregnant with our son Ethan, we were overjoyed. Though my pregnancy was difficult, requiring bed rest for the final trimester, holding our perfect baby boy in my arms made every challenge worthwhile. Surprisingly, my parents seemed to soften when Ethan was born. They visited the hospital with expensive gifts, and even offered to set up a college fund for him. I allowed myself to hope that our relationship might heal through their love for their grandson. "He has the Montgomery chin," my father had remarked, proudly touching Ethan's tiny face with uncharacteristic gentleness. For 3 years we maintained a cordial relationship. Sunday dinners became a monthly tradition, though the underlying tension never fully dissipated. My parents continued to make subtle digs about our humble lifestyle and David's career, but I brushed them off for Ethan's sake. Meanwhile, Vanessa had met Cameron Hughes, the son of a prominent real estate developer from Boston. Their whirlwind romance captivated our parents, who welcomed Cameron into the family with open arms and open checkbooks. When they announced their engagement after just 6 months of dating, my parents immediately offered to fund the wedding of the century. Nothing but the best for our Vanessa, my mother gushed during the engagement party at their estate, an event that cost more than my entire wedding. The Waldorf in Manhattan, a designer gown and a honeymoon tour of Europe, 16 days, 6 countries. I tried to be happy for my sister, helping with wedding plans and listening to her excited chatter about flower arrangements and menu tastings. But I couldn't ignore the stark contrast in how my parents treated our relationships. Still, I reminded myself that envy was unbecoming and focused instead on my growing family and thriving business. Then, just after Ethan's 4th birthday, we noticed something wasn't right. He began experiencing frequent headaches and unusual fatigue. After multiple doctor visits and specialists, we received the devastating diagnosis: Ethan had a rare brain condition that required specialized surgery. Without it, the neurologist explained gently, Ethan might not see his 8th birthday. The surgery needed to be performed by one of only 3 surgeons in the country qualified to do the procedure. It would cost $85,000, and our insurance would cover only a small portion. David and I were devastated but determined. We immediately started liquidating our assets, putting our home on the market, and setting up a crowdfunding page. It was Vanessa who suggested I ask our parents for help. They have more money than they know what to do with, Bree, she said over coffee one afternoon, her 4-carat engagement ring catching the light. And they adore Ethan. I'm sure they'd want to help. I was hesitant given our history, but my son's life was at stake. I swallowed my pride and scheduled a private dinner with my parents, leaving both David and Ethan at home. I wanted to approach them as their daughter, appealing to their love for their grandson without any distractions. Little did I know that this dinner would become the turning point in our family's story, the moment when the perfect Montgomery family facade would begin to crumble, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The evening I approached my parents about Ethan's surgery remains etched in my memory like a wound that refuses to heal. I arrived at their mansion with a folder containing all of Ethan's medical records, the surgical quotes, and a heartfelt letter from his primary doctor, explaining the urgency of the situation. The dining room was impeccable as always. Crystal chandelier glowing softly above the polished mahogany table, fine china set with military precision, and fresh flowers arranged in the sterling silver centerpiece that had been in mother's family for generations. The familiar scent of Miriam's pot roast, my father's favorite, wafted from the kitchen. Everything was perfect, controlled just as my parents preferred their lives to be. You seem tense, Brielle, my mother observed, as she delicately cut into her meat. Is everything all right with your business? She always paused before referring to my consulting firm, as if reluctant to acknowledge its legitimacy. I took a deep breath and placed my water glass down carefully. Actually, I need to discuss something important. It's about Ethan. My father looked up his fork, pausing halfway to his mouth. Is the boy having troubles at school? You know, we could easily get him into Westfield Academy. Their early childhood program is exceptional. No, Dad, it's more serious than that, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my efforts to remain composed. Ethan has been diagnosed with a rare condition called arteriovenous malformation. It's causing pressure on his brain and he needs surgery. Specialized surgery. My mother's hand flew to her pearl necklace, her nervous tell. Oh my, is it dangerous? Very, I admitted, pulling out the medical reports from my folder. Without the surgery, he could suffer permanent brain damage, or I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence. My father took the papers, scanning them with the same critical eye he used for investment portfolios. And your insurance won't cover this, they'll cover about 30%. But the surgeon is out of network, and the procedure is considered experimental by our provider. I slid the financial breakdown across the table. David and I have about $20,000 saved. We're selling the house and liquidating our retirement funds, but we're still coming up short. How much? My father asked, his expression unreadable. $85,000, I said, the number hanging in the air between us. I wouldn't ask if there were any other option. We've applied for every medical grant available, but the waiting lists are long, and Ethan doesn't have that kind of time. A heavy silence fell over the dining room. My mother busied herself, rearranging her silverware, while my father continued reviewing the documents. Finally, he cleared his throat. Brielle, you know we've always taught you about fiscal responsibility and self-sufficiency, he began using his boardroom voice. Your life choices have led you to this financial position. I blinked, stunned by the cold response. Dad, this isn't about me. This is about Ethan, your grandson, and a life-saving procedure. Of course, my mother interjected smoothly. And we care deeply for Ethan. But your father and I have significant financial commitments right now. What commitments could possibly be more important than saving your grandchild's life? I asked, my voice rising despite my determination to remain calm. My father's jaw tightened. Your sister's wedding, for one. We've already invested nearly $200,000, with another $30,000 in deposits for the honeymoon villa in Santorini. I felt as if I'd been doused with ice water. You're saying Vanessa's wedding is more important than Ethan's surgery? That's not what we're saying, my mother replied sharply. But contracts have been signed. Deposits are non-refundable. The Montgomery name stands for something in this community. We can't simply cancel the social event of the season. I'm not asking you to cancel it, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. But surely you could scale back. Move it from the Waldorf to another venue. Choose a less expensive honeymoon destination. Anything to help save your grandson's life. My father stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, a clear signal that the discussion was over. I think you're being emotional, Brielle. Perhaps there are other options you haven't explored. Second mortgages. Medical credit cards. Have you considered taking a loan against your business? I stared at him in disbelief. We've explored everything. I'm coming to you as a last resort. Then perhaps you should focus your energy on finding more creative solutions, he replied coolly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a conference call with Tokyo in 20 minutes. As he walked out, my mother reached across the table and patted my hand in what I suppose she thought was a comforting gesture. Darling, you've always been so resourceful. I'm sure you'll figure something out. And do let us know when Ethan's feeling better. We'd love to have you all over for Sunday dinner again. The disconnect between her words and our reality was so vast that I couldn't formulate a response. I gathered my documents with trembling hands and left without saying goodbye. In the privacy of my car parked in their circular driveway, beneath the glow of imported Italian lanterns, I broke down. Sobs racked my body as the full weight of my parents' betrayal crashed over me. They had just refused to help save their grandchild's life while spending nearly $250,000 on a party for their other daughter. Through my tears, I called David, who had been anxiously waiting to hear how the conversation went. When I told him what happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I'm coming to get you, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. Don't drive like this. No, I insisted, wiping my eyes roughly. I need to do something first. I drove straight to Vanessa's penthouse apartment, desperate to speak with my sister. She had always been my ally, my confidant. Surely she would be as appalled as I was by our parents' decision. Perhaps she would even offer to scale back her wedding plans to help Ethan. After all, she adored her nephew and had always claimed to value family above all else. Little did I know that this visit would reveal another layer of betrayal that would shatter my last remaining illusion about the Montgomery family. Vanessa's luxury high-rise apartment building stood like a gleaming sentinel against the night sky. The doorman recognized me immediately, and allowed me upstairs, without calling ahead, a courtesy extended to immediate family members. As the elevator climbed to the penthouse floor, I tried to compose myself, wiping away mascara smudges and practicing what I would say. Despite everything, I didn't want to come across as accusatory. Vanessa wasn't responsible for our parents' decision, and I needed her as an ally now more than ever. I knocked on her door, smoothing my hair and taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. When the door swung open, I was surprised to see not Vanessa, but Cameron, her fiancé, dressed in casual loungewear and holding a glass of red wine. "Brielle," he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "We weren't expecting you." Before I could respond, Vanessa appeared behind him, her expression shifting quickly from annoyance to concern when she saw my face. "Brie, what happened? You look awful," she said, pulling me inside and guiding me to their expansive living room with its panoramic city views. The space was cluttered with wedding paraphernalia, sample centerpieces, swatches of fabric, and stacks of invitation designs covered every surface. "I just came from dinner with Mom and Dad," I said, my voice still raw from crying. "I asked them for help with Ethan's surgery." Vanessa exchanged a quick glance with Cameron before sitting beside me on their Italian leather sofa. "Oh, I see. And it didn't go well." There was something off in her tone, a hesitation that made me look at her more closely. "They refused, Vanessa. They told me they couldn't help because they've already committed too much money to your wedding." Cameron cleared his throat awkwardly. "I think I'll give you two some privacy," he said, retreating to their bedroom with his wine. Once he was gone, Vanessa's demeanor changed subtly. She crossed her legs and smoothed her silk pajama pants, avoiding my eyes. "Well, they have put down a lot of non-refundable deposits, Brie. The Waldorf ballroom alone was $50,000. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. "Are you seriously defending them right now? We're talking about Ethan's life, Vanessa. Your nephew." She sighed, reaching for a half-empty wine glass on the coffee table. "Of course I care about Ethan. But I also think you're being a bit dramatic. Kids get sick all the time and recover just fine. Have you really explored all medical options? Maybe there's a clinical trial or something." The casual dismissal of my son's life-threatening condition felt like a physical blow. "His neurologist says this surgery is his best chance." "Why are you talking like this? This isn't like you." Vanessa took a long sip of wine before responding. "Look, I'm just saying that maybe Mom and Dad have a point about fiscal responsibility. You chose to marry a nurse, Brielle. You chose to start a business instead of joining Dad's firm where you would have had premium health coverage. So Ethan deserves to die because I married for love instead of money." I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be so melodramatic," Vanessa snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "I didn't mean it like that. I think there might be more to Mom and Dad's decision than you realize." Something in her evasive gaze triggered a sudden suspicion. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "did you already know I was going to ask them for help with Ethan's surgery?" Her silence and the way she suddenly became very interested in a loose thread on her pajamas told me everything. "You knew," I breathed, the realization washing over me like ice water. "They talked to you about it before I even asked them, didn't they?" Vanessa finally met my eyes, defiance replacing guilt. "They called me after your pediatrician sent them that letter about Ethan's condition. They wanted my opinion on how to handle it." My mind reeled. My pediatrician never sent them any letter. How did they even know about Ethan's diagnosis before I told them tonight? A flash of panic crossed her face before she composed herself. "I might have mentioned it to them. You told me about it last week. Remember, I was concerned, so I called Mom." "I told you in confidence," I said, feeling the last threads of trust between us beginning to fray. "And wait, you said they asked for your opinion. What exactly did you tell them, Vanessa?" She stood up abruptly, moving to the window to look out at the city lights. I simply reminded them that they've already committed to funding my wedding and that it wouldn't be fair to jeopardize that at the last minute. It's not just about me, it's about the Montgomery family reputation. 300 guests, including Dad's business associates and Mom's charity board. They can't back out now. I felt physically ill. You actively convinced our parents not to help save Ethan's life, so your wedding wouldn't be downsized. You're twisting my words, she said defensively. Besides, it's not like you don't have options. You have a house you can sell. You have a business. Cameron even suggested you could do one of those social media fundraisers. They're very popular right now. I stood up on shaky legs, unable to remain in her presence a moment longer. My son is fighting for his life, and you're worried about having the perfect flower arrangements and champagne fountain. I don't even recognize you anymore. Vanessa's expression hardened. That's not fair. I've worked my whole life to make this wedding happen. To finally be the center of attention instead of living in your perfect shadow, the intelligent daughter, the responsible one. Do you have any idea what it's been like competing with you all these years? This isn't about some imagined competition, Vanessa, I shouted, my composure finally breaking. This is about a child's life, your nephew's life. Lower your voice, she hissed, glancing nervously toward the bedroom where Cameron had retreated. You're being hysterical. In that moment, looking at my sister's cold, calculating expression, I realized that the bond I thought we shared had been an illusion. Perhaps it always had been. The Vanessa I thought I knew, the ally who had stood by me at my wedding, who had cooed over Ethan in the hospital when he was born, who had sworn that family came first, didn't exist. I'm leaving, I said quietly. But I want you to know something, Vanessa. No matter how beautiful your wedding is, no matter how many society photographs feature your perfect day, you'll have to live with this decision for the rest of your life. And I promise you I will never ever forget what you've done. As I walked out of her apartment for what I knew would be the last time, I heard her call after me, Brielle, don't be like this. You're still invited to the wedding, Brielle. The door closed behind me, and with it closed the last chapter of my relationship with the Montgomery family. I was on my own now, but I was more determined than ever to save my son, with or without their help. The drive home from Vanessa's apartment was a blur. I called David from the car, struggling to explain through tears what had transpired with both my parents and my sister. His steady voice was my anchor as I navigated the rain-slicked streets, his quiet anger matching my own shattered heart. Come home, Bree, he said simply. We'll figure this out together. We always do. When I arrived, our modest home glowed with warmth against the dark night. Inside, Mrs. Abernathy, our elderly neighbor who often helped with childcare, sat knitting in the living room. He's been asleep for about an hour, she whispered, gathering her things. Had a bit of a headache earlier, but the medicine helped. Such a brave little soldier. Her kind eyes lingered on my tear-stained face, but she asked no questions. With a gentle pat on my arm, she left. David and I crept into Ethan's room. In the soft glow of his dinosaur nightlight, our son looked so small and vulnerable, his dark curls splayed against the pillow, his favorite stuffed triceratops clutched tightly in his arms. The sight of him sleeping peacefully, unaware of the adult betrayals and calculations being made around his life, broke something fundamental inside me. I can't lose him, David, I whispered, clinging to my husband's hand. I won't. We'll sell everything, David promised fiercely. I'll pick up extra shifts. We'll make this happen. But the reality was brutal. Even liquidating everything we owned would leave us tens of thousands short, and time was running out. Ethan's headaches were becoming more frequent, and his last MRI showed the malformation was growing. That night, as David finally fell into exhausted sleep beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. The Montgomery family wealth had always been a source of pride for my parents, and now it represented my son's best hope for survival. If they wouldn't give it willingly to save their grandson, then perhaps it was time I took matters into my own hands. The next morning, I called in to my consulting firm and cleared my schedule for the week, citing a family emergency. Then I drove to the public library, 2 towns over, where no one would recognize me, and began my research. I had worked in my father's investment firm during college summers, filing paperwork and assisting his executive assistant. I remembered the complex structure of his various accounts, the offshore investments, and most importantly, the passwords and security questions he used. My father, for all his financial acumen, was surprisingly predictable in his digital security habits, using variations of family birthdays and our childhood dog's name. For 3 days I gathered information, made notes, and formulated a plan. It wasn't theft, I told myself. It was accessing money that should rightfully be used to save my child's life. I would only take what we needed for Ethan's surgery and recovery, no more. On the 4th day, I was ready to act. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, with free Wi-Fi, my laptop open, heart pounding as I accessed my father's private banking portal. His password had changed, but the security questions hadn't. Mother's maiden name, first pet, street where he grew up. Within minutes I was in. My finger hovered over the transfer button. $85,000 from his Cayman Islands account to a new account I had set up under a business name. 1 click and Ethan would have his surgery. 1 click and I would be committing a federal crime. I couldn't do it. Not because I wasn't desperate enough, God knows I was, but because I suddenly realized this wasn't the example I wanted to set for my son. I wanted him to live more than anything in the world, but I also wanted him to grow up with integrity, something my family clearly lacked. I closed the laptop and called David. "I need you to come meet me," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I think I have another way." When he arrived, concern etched on his tired face, I laid out a different plan. A legal one, a risky one, but one that might just work. My consulting firm had helped dozens of small businesses grow and thrive. Many of my clients had become friends over the years. They knew me as honest, hardworking, and now they would know my story. "I'm going public," I told David. "About everything. My parents, Vanessa, the wedding, all of it. Not for revenge, but because it might be Ethan's only chance." David looked uncertain. "Your parents will be furious. They might sue for defamation." "Let them," I said, newfound determination stealing my voice. "Every word will be true. And the public backlash against them would be far worse than anything a court could do to me." That night I wrote my story, sparing no details. The $230,000 wedding, while a child's life hung in the balance. The family that chose champagne fountains over brain surgery. The sister who couldn't bear to downsize her special day to save her nephew. The next morning I created social media accounts under my real name, and posted my story linking to the legitimate fundraiser we'd already established for Ethan's surgery. Then I reached out to local news stations, offering an exclusive interview. "This isn't about money anymore," I told David as we hit publish on the posts. "It's about holding them accountable. It's about making sure Ethan knows that some things matter more than family reputation and social standing. Truth matters. Love matters." Within hours my posts began to gain traction. By evening they had gone viral. Local news picked up the story first, then national outlets. Wealthy grandparents refuse life-saving surgery, while funding lavish wedding became the headline of the week. Donations began pouring into Ethan's fund from strangers around the country. $5, $20, hundreds of dollars at a time. My phone rang constantly, journalists seeking comments, old friends expressing support, even clients offering to help. But no call came from my parents or Vanessa. 3 days later, as the story continued to spread and Ethan's fund approached the halfway mark, I received an unexpected visitor at our home. It was Cameron, Vanessa's fiancé, looking uncomfortable in jeans and a sweatshirt rather than his usual tailored suits. "Can we talk?" he asked, shifting nervously on our front porch. I let him in curious despite my wariness. Vanessa doesn't know I'm here, he admitted, as I offered him coffee in our kitchen. But I couldn't stand by anymore. What they're doing, what she's doing, it's wrong. And I need you to know that I tried to change her mind. Why are you really here, Cameron? I asked, too exhausted for social niceties. He pulled out his phone, showing me a banking app. I want to donate to Ethan's fund, privately. It's not the full amount, but it's what I can access without Vanessa noticing. $30,000. I stared at him, speechless. I've seen Ethan at family gatherings. He's a great kid, Cameron continued, his voice thick with emotion. And honestly, this whole wedding circus has gotten out of hand. I wanted something simple, but Vanessa and your parents, it's like they're trying to impress the entire Eastern Seaboard. Why not tell Vanessa you're doing this? I asked. Cameron's expression darkened. Because I'm beginning to realize that the woman I proposed to isn't the person I thought she was. And I have some serious thinking to do before the wedding. As he completed the transfer to Ethan's fund, I felt a complex mixture of gratitude and vindication. Perhaps there was still some justice in the world after all. Thank you, I said simply, as I walked him to the door. He paused at the threshold. There's something else you should know. Your parents are furious about the publicity. Your father is talking about legal action. And Vanessa, he hesitated. What about Vanessa? She's telling everyone who'll listen that you're mentally unstable, that you've always been jealous of her, that Ethan's condition isn't as serious as you're making it out to be. His eyes reflected genuine regret. I'm sorry, Brielle. I truly am. After he left, I sat alone in my living room contemplating what he'd told me. My family wasn't just refusing to help, they were actively trying to undermine our efforts to save Ethan. The realization should have crushed me, but instead it crystallized my resolve. I know this story has taken an intense turn, but that's how life works sometimes, isn't it? The people we expect to stand by us can surprise us in the worst ways. If you're feeling the emotion of this moment, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're about to see how a mother's love can move mountains when everything is stacked against her. Has someone you trusted ever betrayed you when you needed them most? The next part of this story might feel familiar. The day after Cameron's visit, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Expecting another reporter, I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to press the green button. Brielle Montgomery. The woman's voice was crisp and professional. Yes, this is she, I replied cautiously. My name is Savannah Williams. I'm a producer for the American Morning Show. We'd like to have you on to discuss your situation with Ethan. My heart raced. American Morning was a nationally broadcast program with millions of viewers. The exposure could help us reach our fundraising goal for Ethan's surgery. I appreciate the interest, I said, but I need to be clear. This isn't about creating a family scandal. This is about saving my son. Of course, Savannah assured me. That's precisely why we want to have you on. Your story highlights the healthcare challenges many families face, even those who seem to have support systems in place. We'd also like to have a medical expert discuss Ethan's condition to educate our viewers. 2 days later, David and I found ourselves in a Manhattan studio, Ethan safely with Mrs. Abernathy at home. The studio lights were hot, and my palms sweated as I clutched David's hand waiting for our segment to begin. The host, Rebecca Chen, had a reputation for tough but fair interviews. As the cameras began rolling, she turned to us with a sympathetic smile. Brielle and David Winters, thank you for joining us today. You've recently found yourselves in an unimaginable situation, fighting not only for your son's health, but also navigating a painful family rift. Can you tell our viewers about Ethan and the treatment he needs? With a steady voice, I explained Ethan's condition, the specialized surgery, and our desperate search for funding. David, still in his hospital scrubs from his early morning shift, spoke about the medical aspects with professional clarity. And your parents, Rebecca continued carefully. They recently spent a substantial amount $230,000 on your sister's wedding, but declined to help with Ethan's $85,000 surgery. Is that correct? Yes, I answered simply. They felt they had already committed those funds to my sister's wedding and couldn't or wouldn't redirect any portion to help save their grandson's life. That must have been devastating to hear. It was David interjected, his voice breaking slightly. What's been even more devastating is the active campaign to discredit Brielle and minimize Ethan's condition since we went public. Rebecca's eyebrows shot up. Can you elaborate on that? I hesitated, but David continued, protective fury evident in his tone. Brielle's sister has been telling people that we're exaggerating Ethan's condition for money. Her parents, Ethan's grandparents, have threatened legal action to silence us, rather than facing the public scrutiny of their choices. The interview continued for 15 minutes, concluding with Rebecca providing the details of Ethan's fundraising page. We'll be posting this information on our website and social media channels as well, she added. Brielle, David, thank you for sharing your story with us today. As we left the studio, my phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. The fundraiser was exploding with donations. By the time we reached the parking garage, we had received another $20,000. It's working, David whispered, tears in his eyes as he scrolled through the comments of support. But the most surprising call came as we were driving home. A blocked number that I almost ignored. Mrs. Winters, a male voice I didn't recognize. This is Dr. Samuel Richardson from Boston Children's Hospital. I saw your interview this morning. I gripped the phone tighter, signaling to David to pull over. Yes, I'm one of the 3 surgeons in the country who performs the procedure your son needs. I've reviewed the information you shared with American Morning, and I'd like to offer my services. My breath caught. That's incredibly generous, but we still don't have the full amount. You misunderstand me, Dr. Richardson interrupted gently. I'm offering to perform Ethan's surgery pro bono. And Boston Children's has an assistance program that can cover most of the hospital costs. Your fundraising can go toward rehabilitation and any expenses your family will incur during recovery. I couldn't speak, tears streaming down my face as David took the phone. Dr. Richardson, this is David Winters, Ethan's father, he said, his own voice thick with emotion. We can't thank you enough. When could you see Ethan? I have an opening next Tuesday. Can you bring him to Boston for an evaluation? We'll be there, David promised. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparations. We scheduled Ethan's appointment with Dr. Richardson, arranged accommodations in Boston, and continued managing the still-growing fundraiser, which had now surpassed our goal. The night before we were set to leave for Boston, I received another unexpected call, this time from my father's executive assistant Patricia, who had been with the company for over 20 years. Brielle, I shouldn't be doing this, she said in a hushed voice, but there are things you need to know. Your father has been in crisis meetings all week with his PR team and lawyers. Your interview has caused significant blowback from clients and partners. I'm sorry about that, Patricia, but we did what we had to do for Ethan, I replied firmly. I understand that, and actually, that's not why I'm calling. She paused. There's something else, something about your sister's wedding fund. My attention sharpened. What about it? The money isn't just coming from your parents' personal accounts. A significant portion, about half, is being siphoned from the company's charitable foundation. I nearly dropped the phone. That's illegal. Those funds are supposed to go to actual charities, not personal expenses. Exactly, Patricia confirmed. And several board members have raised concerns, especially now that the family is under scrutiny. There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow. I thought you should know. This information presented a moral dilemma. We already had the funds for Ethan's surgery thanks to public generosity and Dr. Richardson's kindness. Did I really need to get involved in my father's potential financial improprieties? But then I thought about all the legitimate charities and causes that had been deprived of those funds. Also, my sister could have an extravagant wedding while my son nearly died. Thank you for telling me, Patricia, I said finally. I appreciate your integrity. After consulting with David, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I contacted the board members Patricia had mentioned and offered to provide documentation about the misappropriation of charitable funds. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about accountability. Ethan's surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early autumn. The Boston Children's Hospital gleamed in the morning sunlight as David and I walked through the sliding glass doors, Ethan between us clutching his dinosaur backpack. Despite the gravity of the situation, our hearts were lighter than they had been in months. We had hope again. Dr. Richardson met us in his office, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he high-fived Ethan. "So you're the young man I've been hearing about," he said, kneeling to Ethan's level. "I understand you're quite the dinosaur expert." Ethan nodded shyly. "Triceratops is my favorite." "Excellent choice." Dr. Richardson nodded seriously. "Very underrated dinosaur." The pre-surgery consultation went better than we could have hoped. Dr. Richardson explained everything in terms Ethan could understand, using dinosaur analogies that had our son giggling, despite the serious circumstances. The surgery would be complex, but had a high success rate, especially given that we'd caught the condition before it caused permanent damage. As Ethan colored dinosaur pictures with a child life specialist, Dr. Richardson spoke candidly with David and me about the recovery process. "He's young and resilient," he assured us. "I expect a full recovery, though he'll need regular checkups for the next few years." "We'll do whatever it takes," I promised, squeezing David's hand. "I know you will," Dr. Richardson replied, his expression softening. "I saw your interview, remember, the lengths you've gone to for your son. That's what parenting is all about." The day of the surgery arrived with a mix of terror and hope. I kissed Ethan's forehead as the anesthesiologist prepared to take him to the operating room, whispering, "I love you to the moon and back, little man." "And to the dinosaurs and back," he replied sleepily, our special saying. The 7-hour surgery was the longest wait of our lives. David and I paced the waiting room, drank terrible coffee, and tried to distract ourselves with magazines neither of us actually read. When Dr. Richardson finally emerged, still in his surgical scrubs, the look of satisfaction on his face told us everything before he even spoke. "The surgery went perfectly," he announced. "We were able to completely repair the malformation. He's in recovery now and you can see him soon." The relief was so overwhelming that my knees buckled and David caught me before I fell. We held each other, sobbing with joy and gratitude in the middle of the waiting room. As Ethan recovered in the pediatric ICU, his small body connected to various monitors and IVs, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. There were dozens of missed calls and messages, but one text from an unknown number caught my attention. "Turn on CNN when you can. Montgomery Investment Group, breaking news. Hope Ethan is doing well. Patricia." With Ethan sleeping peacefully and David by his side, I slipped down to the family lounge and found the remote for the small television mounted on the wall. When I turned to CNN, my father's face filled the screen, looking ashen as he was escorted from his office building by men in suits, not his usual entourage of assistants and executives but federal agents. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, "CEO of Montgomery Investment Group under investigation for misappropriation of charitable funds." I watched in stunned silence as the reporter detailed the allegations. Over $3 million in charitable foundation money had been diverted for personal use over the past 5 years, including significant sums for family events. The investigation had been triggered by whistleblower information provided to the board of directors and subsequently to the authorities. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "How could you do this to us?" I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to the sister who had valued her wedding over her nephew's life. Another text arrived, this one from my mother. Your father may go to prison because of you. I hope you're satisfied. To this I did respond, Dad may go to prison because of his own actions, Mom. And Ethan is going to live because of mine. His surgery was successful. Not that you asked. She never replied. The scandal dominated financial news for weeks. My father resigned in disgrace as CEO of Montgomery Investment Group. The lavish wedding at the Waldorf was cancelled, not downsized, but completely called off. According to industry gossip, Cameron had broken off the engagement after learning the full extent of the situation, unable to reconcile himself with Vanessa's priorities and character. I felt no joy in any of this, only a profound sadness for what my family could have been. But I had a new focus now, Ethan's recovery, and the future we could build together. As Ethan's strength returned day by day, so did mine. The outpouring of support from strangers, friends, and even some of my parents' social circle, who privately reached out to express their shock at my family's behavior, reminded me that genuine compassion still existed in the world. 3 weeks after the surgery, Ethan was cleared to return home. As David carried our sleepy son into our house, now safe from the threat that had been hanging over us for so long, I paused in the doorway, overwhelmed with gratitude and perspective. Our modest home, which my parents had always subtly disparaged, was filled with something their mansion never had: genuine love and integrity. The fundraiser, which had continued to grow even after Dr. Richardson's offer, now contained nearly $300,000, far more than we needed for Ethan's care. After careful consideration, David and I established a foundation to help other families facing similar situations, children needing specialized medical care that insurance wouldn't fully cover. We named it the Ethan Winters Foundation and committed to ensuring that no parent would have to choose between saving their child and maintaining family relationships, or be forced to go public with private pain to secure help. The first donation to the foundation came from an unexpected source, Cameron Hughes, who contributed $100,000, with a simple note, "For the kids who need it, no strings attached." The reckoning had been painful, but from the ashes of my former family, something meaningful was emerging, a legacy of help rather than harm, of compassion rather than cold calculation. As we tucked Ethan into his own bed that night, his favorite dinosaurs arranged protectively around him, he asked a question that broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. "Mom, when can I see Grandma and Grandpa again?" And Auntie Vanessa. David and I exchanged looks over his head. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that some relationships can't and shouldn't be repaired? "We'll see, buddy," I said, gently stroking his hair. "Right now we're just focusing on you getting better. There are so many people who love you and can't wait to see you healthy again." "Like Dr. Richardson?" he asked sleepily. "Like Dr. Richardson," I confirmed. "And Mrs. Abernathy and your teachers and all the nice people who helped us." As Ethan drifted off to sleep, I realized that the family we choose can sometimes mean more than the family we're born into. And though the cost had been high, I wouldn't change a single decision I'd made to save my son. 1 year after Ethan's successful surgery, our lives had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The Ethan Winters Foundation had helped 15 families access specialized medical care for their children, with more applications coming in every week. David had been promoted to nurse manager of the pediatric unit at his hospital, and my consulting business had expanded to include a division specifically focused on helping medical nonprofits optimize their operations. Most importantly, Ethan was thriving. His follow-up scans showed no signs of the arteriovenous malformation returning. He had grown 2 inches, developed an even more passionate interest in paleontology, and started playing soccer with an energy that sometimes brought tears to my eyes as I watched from the sidelines. On a crisp Saturday morning, as I sat on a park bench watching Ethan practice with his team, a familiar figure approached and hesitantly sat beside me. My mother, Eleanor Montgomery, looked older than when I'd last seen her. Her perfectly maintained appearance had slipped somewhat her designer outfit, slightly outdated her usually impeccable hair, showing a few strands of gray at the temples. "He looks well," she said quietly, watching Ethan run across the field. I nodded, keeping my eyes on my son. "He is well. No thanks to you or Dad." She flinched but didn't leave. "I deserve that. I made terrible choices, Brielle. Unforgivable ones." "Why are you here, Mom?" I asked, finally turning to look at her. Eleanor twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I hadn't seen since I was a child. "Your father was sentenced yesterday. 3 years. Reduced from 5 because he cooperated and made restitution." I had deliberately avoided following the case in the media. "I'm sorry it came to that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in my father's downfall. "The house is being sold to cover the legal fees and settlements," she continued. "I'm moving to a condo downtown next month." "You'll be okay," I said. "You still have your family money. The trust fund from my maternal grandfather that my mother had always kept separate from my father's finances." "Yes," she admitted. "I won't suffer financially. But I've lost everything else." Her voice broke. "My social standing. My friends who weren't really friends, I've discovered. My younger daughter who hasn't spoken to me since we couldn't fund her rescheduled wedding. And my elder daughter and grandson who I failed in the worst possible way." We sat in silence watching Ethan score a goal and celebrate with an elaborate dinosaur-inspired dance that made his teammates laugh. "I don't expect your forgiveness," my mother finally said. "But I want you to know that I was wrong. So terribly wrong. About everything that matters." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation or calculation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, I found only genuine regret and loss. "Ethan asks about you sometimes," I admitted. "And Dad. Even Vanessa." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Does he?" "Children have an incredible capacity for forgiveness," I said carefully. "More than adults usually." "And you?" she asked softly. "Do you have any capacity for forgiveness?" I considered the question seriously. "I'm not there yet, Mom. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully trust you again. But I don't want to carry this anger forever either. And I don't want to teach Ethan that people can't change, or that family bonds can never be repaired, even if they take new forms." "That's more than I deserve," she whispered. "Maybe start small," I suggested. "Come to his next soccer game, sit with us, see how it feels." "I'd like that," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. As for Vanessa, the story was different. After her wedding was canceled and the scandal broke, she had moved to Los Angeles to pursue modeling opportunities away from the East Coast gossip. According to mutual acquaintances, she blamed me entirely for the family's downfall and had no interest in reconciliation. That wound would take longer to heal if it ever did. My father, serving his sentence in a minimum security prison, had sent a handwritten letter addressed to Ethan on his 8th birthday. It contained an awkward but seemingly sincere apology and a promise to be a better grandfather when he was released. I had let Ethan read it, answering his questions as honestly as age-appropriately as possible. "Grandpa made some big mistakes," I'd explained. "He's trying to fix them now." Life continued to move forward. The foundation grew, helping more families each month. David and I welcomed a daughter, Lily, who became Ethan's adoring shadow. And slowly, cautiously, my mother began to establish a new relationship with us, not based on social status or appearances, but on genuine affection and respect. 2 years after my mother reappeared at the soccer field, we received news that my father would be released early for good behavior. His first act as a free man was to donate half of his remaining personal assets to the Ethan Winters Foundation, with a public statement acknowledging his failures and expressing hope for redemption. When we finally met in person, at a neutral restaurant with David beside me for support, my father looked like a different man. Prison had stripped away his arrogance, but had also given him time to reflect on what truly mattered. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends," he told me, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just to you and Ethan but to everyone I hurt with my selfishness and pride." It wasn't an instant reconciliation. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, one small interaction at a time. But as the months passed, something remarkable happened. The new family we formed, imperfect, humbled but genuine, became stronger than the facade we had maintained before. Even more surprising was the day 3 years after the surgery when Vanessa showed up at our door. Divorced from a brief unhappy marriage to a Hollywood producer and struggling with her own demons, she had finally faced some hard truths about herself. "I don't expect you to welcome me back with open arms," she said, standing awkwardly on our porch. "But I've been in therapy for a year, and my counselor says I can't move forward without facing my past. So here I am, facing the worst thing I've ever done." Reconciliation with Vanessa was the slowest and most challenging process of all. The betrayal had cut deeper because we had once been so close, but for Ethan's sake and ultimately for our own healing, we began the difficult work of rebuilding that relationship too. As I watched my son play with his sister in our backyard one evening, my father pushing them on the swings, while my mother and a tentative Vanessa prepared dinner in the kitchen, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. A terrible choice had revealed the true character of everyone involved. The facade of family had been shattered, but from those broken pieces we had constructed something far more valuable: authentic connection based on hard-earned wisdom rather than obligation or appearance. Ethan's life had been saved not by the people who should have stepped forward first, but by strangers moved by compassion. Dr. Richardson, the thousands of anonymous donors, and even Cameron, who had found his own moral compass when faced with a clear choice between right and wrong. In saving my son, I had lost my original family but gained a truer one. The price had been high, but as I watched Ethan's face light up with laughter, healthy, whole, and full of promise, I knew it had been worth every painful step of the journey. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire story. If you've ever had to fight for someone you love against all odds, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments below. How did you find the strength to keep going when everything seemed stacked against you? Did karma eventually catch up with those who wronged you, or did you find your own path to peace? Don't forget to like this video if my family journey resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and justice. And share this with someone who might need to hear that. Sometimes standing alone for what's right is the bravest thing you can do. I'm grateful for this amazing community and the support you've shown me through sharing my story. Until next time, remember that true family is defined by love and loyalty, not by blood.